All right, we're going to transition to our next panel, but I want to do a little interactive tidbit. Are y'all with me for that? Yeah, that works. Okay. So let's do a quick roll call. If you are a therapist or a behavioral health professional, please raise your hand. Hey, let's give it up for them. Hey. If you are a student in the Atlanta area, raise your hand. Okay, sounds good, sounds good. Any other professionals in the nonprofit industry? Raise your hand. Okay, sounds good. And then lastly, artists, singers, songwriters, because I know you have a few. Hey. All right, thank you guys. As I take my seat, take a second just to look at somebody across the table, tell them that you're happy that they're here, and introduce yourself to them because we'll be getting really cozy all day long.
I'm sorry, I didn't think I had Eshontee yet.
All righty. Oh my gosh, I'm back. How's everybody doing today? My name is Catie Williams. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Silence the Shame, and I am so pleased to be moderating this conversation today. Before we begin, I would like to give a chance for each of our speakers today to do a brief introduction. Tell us who you are, where you come from, what you're doing, and then we'll jump right in. Josh, we'll start with you.
Yep, how y'all doing today? Blessings. I'm Josh Waters. I'm a singer-songwriter, originally from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, but I live here in Atlanta. Respect, blessings. And I'm happy to be here today, man. Thank you so much for everybody who's come up before me to share your stories. I genuinely appreciate it. Respect.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eshontee Rowe. I am not only a youth advocate, I'm on a youth advisory board for a mayor group, but I'm a foster care youth advocate because I've lived experience in the Georgia foster care system. I also am a singer-songwriter. I am actually out of the Albany area, but I am from Decatur where it's greater, so it's good to be back in my city and in my home.
Hi everyone, I'm Milan. I'm currently in school for film right now and I'm working in healthcare as an optometric technician and I'm a huge mental health advocate. I'm really happy that everybody's here and vulnerable with us today, so thank you.
All right, and good afternoon. Is it afternoon yet? No, not just yet. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Vaughn. I am not a singer-songwriter, but I am born and raised right here in Atlanta from the east side as well, Decatur, where it's great. So a lot of synergy already on the stage. Licensed professional counselor, executive director of Holistic Atlanta, which is a health tech company that focuses on mental health and developmental pediatrics. Professor at Clark Atlanta and the graduate, there we go, that's it. In the counseling education program, work with our master students and our future therapists, and then also I oversee the psychology clinic down at Children's Healthcare at Hughes Spalding Hospital. So we are fully immersed in the field of mental health here in Atlanta. We have a very robust environment. So great conversations you all are gonna have this morning.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you all for joining us today. So I'm gonna jump right in. We're talking about embracing the fears of young adulthood. I know I'm a young adult. Some of you are older adults. But do y'all remember that fear that was kind of attached to, your quarter life crisis? Y'all remember that? It's interesting, huh? Transitioning into adulthood looks a lot different, though, for Generation Z, the individuals born after 1997, compared to previous generations as the world around them changes rapidly. For example, the New York Times reported that Gen Z adults face day-to-day monetary concerns, including the relentless crush of debt and inflation, making it uneasy to consider what they want for themselves long-term. In addition, climate anxiety and the turmoil from a multi-year pandemic that has left them mourning family and friends, and the losses of varied experiences such as conventional college experiences or traditions of starting their first job. I can remember when the pandemic hit, I had just graduated college, and I remember so many of my friends and peers were mourning the experiences that they would have had COVID not interrupted that. And even though we've still shifted a little bit further away from the peak of the pandemic, there's still a lot of things that COVID affects, right? So thinking of young adulthood, I would love to hear from our 3 young adults. And if you could just share a little bit, whoever feels comfortable, about what are some of your biggest fears about navigating young adulthood?
I guess I'll go first. I too graduated in the midst of the pandemic. I graduated with my bachelor's degree with music from Albany State University. So I know exactly how that is and the pain and the trauma that came from that. I remember sitting and crying because I'm like, I'm supposed to graduate and this not supposed to be like this. It was real bad, it was real bad. But one of the biggest fear is failure. You know, we're taught that we're supposed to go through a certain course of action. We're supposed to either go to college, we're supposed to go to the military, or we're supposed to get this nice job that's going to carry us. And from being a business owner, well, serial entrepreneur, and starting several businesses that did not work out, the biggest thing that weighs, and that I'm currently still working through, is the failure of starting and then stopping. And then it's like, dang, you have the pressures of social media, that you have these 25-year-olds or less, you got these 20-year-old millionaires, and you're like, dang, I'm 25 and I'm not a millionaire yet. How they do it? Like, dang, like they got kids now, and I got all my classmates that got kids, but I ain't got no man. Well, I got a man, like, make that clear. I got a man. But, you know, you have those ones that I don't have a man, and I'm not engaged to be married. I don't have no babies yet, and it's the constant, like, dang, I'm failing. Like, dang, they're doing this, and they're doing these great things. I'm just a failure. So the biggest thing I would say for our generation is failure.
I'd say, to piggyback off of that, failure, I think one of my biggest fears is finding my purpose, knowing what my purpose is. I've always been someone who is so interested in so many different things and trying to figure out what that's gonna be, what that means for me, what that looks like for the rest of my life. And I'm so young, I'm only 19, I can do a lot of things, but that's always been really scary for me, not knowing what my purpose is, not knowing if it's gonna be good, not knowing if it's gonna be what I want. So I definitely think that's a big fear.
Yeah, so kind of to merge both of those, I know me personally as a young adult, I experienced imposter syndrome. And feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm not doing enough. This person is doing this, I'm doing this. This person has this job. And even thinking back to what Lauren said about social media, you know, they say comparison is the thief of joy, and I feel like at times social media is the root of that. You know, you get on social media, you're looking at your timeline, it's like, oh, she's in Dubai, oh, you know, he got a new car, and I'm sitting here in my Honda, you know, and I'm, you know, haven't gone on a trip, right? So you feel a little bit comparison. So I would say that's my experience. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you all think it looks like as young adults to have those conversations around what we're experiencing? Because all these things that we're saying can affect our mental health, right? When you're having comparison or when you're unsure of your purpose, those things can weigh heavy on you. So how do you start navigating those conversations with your peers and other young adults? Would any of you like to chime in?
What I started doing, first of all, I feel like most of us want to know who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, right? And I think in society, there are so many things that are put in place to like provide us with like what seems like the answer to that. And I think until you know who you are, it's easy for us to like dabble in different things, looking for reflections of ourselves, right? So me being a victim of that, I grew up without my father. My father passed when I was like 6 or 7. And so I was a guy who was constantly looking for images or reflections of what a man was supposed to be. How was I supposed to walk? You know what I mean? You got family members who were either in the streets or went to college. It's a spectrum. And I was trying to figure out how did I want to do that? And so as an artist, what I started recently doing to kind of like spark these conversations was having what I call sessions in therapy. And so where I know that my generation, I'm 26, we all feel these different things, but there aren't many spaces where it's safe enough to have conversations. Not to show up with the answers, but to show up with the questions, you know what I mean? And just creating a safe space so that we can talk and kind of sort through these issues and arrive at some type of conclusion that's conducive for us all, you know what I mean? So sessions in therapy was what I started trying to do that for myself and my peers, yeah.
So me and my friends, we have check-ins. We check in, hey girl, how you doing? What's going on? And whatever that initial response is, we cannot say good. Good, it just doesn't work. You know, that's something that's really generic and we just lay that on thick, like, yeah, I'm good. And it's like, no, baby, what's real good? Like, what's really good? What's going on? And so we have weekly check-ins and we just kind of evaluate where we are. Like a lot of my friends, because I serve as a huge mentor to so many, they're still in college and they're still trying to figure out what their stance is or what they believe in, and they're trying to negotiate and figure out like what their friend lists look like and what they want for their life. And so we do these check-ins and we're just like, hey, so this week was a bad week. Let's talk about, let's identify what was good about the week. All right, let's acknowledge these fears. And because I'm a believer, I always so respect to the word. I feel like, all right, let's look in the word where we can find this at, because we're going to get through this. And my favorite thing to say is that joy comes in the morning. We have to go through this process. But your joy is coming in the morning. And I also leave them with a quote all the time saying that we have to be buried under the mud so we can sprout and be planted where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's good.
And so we have these check-ins, and it's like some days we sit down and we cry and cry and cry. But other days we're like, okay, well, now that we've gotten these tears out, let's try to find a course of action and let's try to find a plan. Like, let's get it. Like, we got stuff to do.
Yeah, that's good. And that reminds me too, the hashtag check on your strong friends.
Yes.
Because oftentimes there's people like Eshontee who are leading those conversations like, hey girl, how are you? But who's checking on her? Yeah. So just making sure that you're doing your part. If you are the strong friend, being vulnerable, and then if you are not necessarily, or you don't, claim that title, always checking in on that one person who is always the other person checking in, because that's so important. So Dr. Vaughn, when we think about these conversations and doing those check-ins, what would you say are some missed opportunities that we, miss out on to support good mental health in conversations and interactions with young folks?
Well, first I want to say this is really dope for me, right? I'm a millennial, and I'm an older millennial. I was born in the early 80s, so I'm 38, slowly but surely getting close to 40, right? But one thing that I tell a lot of my clients that are in this age range, I say, the difference between being in your early 20s and your late 30s is that, right? That time goes by very, very quickly, especially if you're driven, if you're focused and you have some goals and you're working towards that. You all can think back when you were in high school, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? And it's starting to sound a little weird, like, man, I'm getting old, right? So this is really cathartic for me to be able to have conversations with people that are just getting their life started, right? The one thing that I want you all to remember is that you all are in tree planting phase, right? And not a full-grown tree, you're planting the seed. Right? So if anybody loves working out in their yard like me, they know that it takes a lot of work to actually treat the soil, dig the holes, to get the ground ready for the seed to germinate, right? But what happens in this generation, and when you use that analogy to life, we plant the seeds and then tomorrow we go digging up the seeds like, all right, now what's going on? How come you're not a tree yet, right? You all have to be able to understand that time is gonna be your best friend or your biggest detriment, okay? That's for anyone. If you actually know how to leverage time, you will get exactly where you want to be and beyond that, okay? What happens is a lot of times, especially for our generation, we were a little hard-headed, right? So we were the kids that grew up with the dial-up internet and the cable, right? So we thought we knew everything in terms of awareness, right? And so we learned the hard way of understanding some of these life lessons. The important thing, I think the one thing that your generation just makes sure that you all need to do is make sure you just receive, like listen to receive and not to respond. Okay? Because I promise you, life is not gonna get easier, you're gonna get better. Okay, you will get better. You're gonna have challenge after challenge after challenge, right? Especially if you wanna build a family, build a business, you wanna excel, you're gonna take some lumps, right? Make sure that you just understand and have a global view of things. Stay outside the frame so you can see the entire picture. as opposed to getting caught up in the details, all right? So just having that clear view and understanding that it's a process, all right? And I hate this cliche phrase, I say it all the time, but you really must trust the process. You respect the process, right? And you recognize if you put in that time, you respect time, you're gonna be way further ahead than where you thought you were gonna be 10 years from now. That I can promise you.
I needed that. That was good advice. Thank you, Dr. Vaughn. Milan, why do you think it's difficult for young adults to talk about mental health and have these conversations?
Gosh, it's such a vulnerable thing. I think, I'd say young people, but I think all ages, we don't always know what to say when somebody comes to us with vulnerability, with emotions and stuff like that. I'm lucky enough I have friends where we can go and we can check in on each other, but I always try to make sure that I'm like, hey, do you want me to talk or do you want me to just listen right now?
Yeah.
Like, what do you need from me? How can I help you? Like, are we gonna make a plan? Do you want me to just hug you while you cry? Whatever that is, I try to make sure that I get that for them. So I think that it's more difficult just because it's such a vulnerable thing for us to do, but we need it. It's very necessary.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. As I ask my next question, I wanted to see who's in the audience. Do I have any entrepreneurs in the audience starting your business? Awesome. This question's for you. Josh, what advice can you give to entrepreneurs or people that are starting businesses about managing their mental health?
I would say, like the lady spoke before, creating that space for like self-care. And I always speak to the duality, right? So as an artist, it's a business no different than someone who's selling tires or doing anything. And so when you show up for your job, you have to show up and represent whatever brand it is that you're standing for. But that isn't your person. So I think just having that mindfulness to be able to pay attention to the fact that there's a difference between whatever your work is and your personal. And sometimes we're not always afforded the opportunity for our work to necessarily align in the now with our purpose if we're in pursuit of a certain something. But just making sure that we stay mindful and aware of the difference and the separation between the two. And just taking that time to tend to self for real. But yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Eshontee, due to the stigma, shame, and fear surrounding suicide, there can be a lack of sensitivity and caution regarding discussing a person's lived experience. Could you tell us about your experience with this and what you wish others knew about discussing suicide?
Absolutely. I am a survivor. My father decided to take his life when I was 8 years old. I have 3 other siblings. And so navigating through life was really hard. My mom kind of backed away from the church because one thing they told her was, oh, your husband in hell. And I've had family members come to me and tell me, your daddy is in hell. And I'm like, okay, all right, God, we're going to have a conversation about this. And I had a conversation with him like a year ago about this. And I said, God, you're going to have to tell me out of your mouth that my dad didn't go to hell. And he sent my pastor. And my pastor told me, we have no heaven or hell to put anybody in. We don't sit in that judgment seat. So we have to learn to stay in our lane and let God be God and let us be who we are and who he created us to be. We don't have that final binding authority to say, you go here, you go there. And so, all right, hold on. It's okay. So it can be hard at times. Ooh, hold on, I'm sorry. That just ripped something open for me real quick. I'm sorry. I'm really good with strategic sharing. Whew.
We're vulnerable today.
Jesus. Okay, all right. Thank you, God. All right. Oh, thank you. And so it can be very hard and very challenging because people come from such a judgmental lens. And as a person who's also dealt with suicidal ideation, it's that point of like, dang, like my dad did it, so it's a shame that my father did it. And then there's another added shame of like, why am I wrestling with it? Because I know the effects of it. Because I think that oftentimes when we're going through those spaces, because I have lived experience with it, we don't see, other people sometimes don't see the ripple effect that takes place. So you may have a family member who does it, and then your family is split apart and torn apart, and then you wrestle with it, and it's like, dang, I don't want to do the same thing that they did, but like, dang, like, I want the pain to end. And thank you for saying that it's not that I want to die, it's just I want this set of pain to just end. Like, it's just, I want it to be over with. And so it can be really challenging because you don't know who to express those things to. And then you don't want the added later, and thank you, Mona Lisa, for bringing this up, for going into a hospital space, and then they're like, well, you have a diagnosis. And now you really feel cornered and you feel alone, like, dang, nobody gets me. Like, I gotta take this medication. I have to deal with the effects that my loved one is taking their life, and I wanna take my life, and it's a very confusing space. And so oftentimes, when people don't know or don't have knowledge in a certain area, they can be very ignorant, and they could just say things that they're like, well, hold up, I didn't need that. And so, oh, Jesus, I think I'm going off on a tangent. Can you remind me of the question? I need to reel it back in.
Just what do you wish others knew when having these conversations around suicide?
I wish people would just know to just, when you have an extra added opinion that doesn't sit well in your spirit, don't give it to nobody else. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Like, if you were going through something with your mental health and you wouldn't want anybody to say something out of order or negligent to you when you're in that space, like, oh, you just doing too much, oh, you just being dramatic. You wouldn't want somebody to say that to you. Don't say that to them, because let people have their space. And let people have a chance to be able to express themselves the way that they need to express themselves. Because you don't know if you could be that one person to push them over the edge.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing your experience and just being vulnerable with us. I really appreciate that. And also, too, for those listening, again, if this information or the stories may act as a trigger, just remember to take some time away from the live stream or from this space physically to take time for yourself and self-care. And remember, if you or someone you know is in crisis, to text or call 988. Dr. Vaughn, what guidance or examples of conversations would you offer to people who want to support someone with thoughts of suicide?
So great question. And this is like the $1 million question that most people ask, once a situation kind of comes to fruition, right? We always say, well, how could I have known, or what could I have done? And this is something that Eshontee and I, we've been speaking about this for a number of years. Even when I first met her 5 years ago, one of the first things I said was QPR, right? Question, persuade, and respond, right? And what that essentially means is that when someone is in a situation of where they're having very serious thoughts about taking their own life, there are no questions that are not personal enough, right? We need to make sure this person is stable and can get through this moment of time, right? If anyone is a clinician, if you work inpatient, if you work in the community, et cetera, we have to create a sense of stabilization, right? And make sure their thoughts are in a really decent place so that we can connect them with some assistance, right? So asking very personal and direct questions. Are you having thoughts? Do you have a means? Do you actually have a plan, right? Because most folks, when they're in that space, they want to be heard, one, and they want the pain to go away, too, right? And the pain is not necessarily emotional pain. It could be stress. It could be a sense of being overwhelmed. It could just be intense pressure that no one sees that they're just placing on that individual, right? And the resources internally become, the stress on the outside becomes a lot greater than the resources internally. And that's when a person gets to that place. So asking direct questions, number one. Two, persuade them, right? Persuade them to be able to get through another day, right? I'm not sure, someone over here said that, right? Live to see tomorrow, right? Let's get to tomorrow, and then tomorrow, let's get to the next day. And the next day, we're gonna get to that next day, right? Creating a sense of hope, helping them understand, listen, everyone is dealing with some things, right? And a lot of us really don't know what we're doing in terms of being able to get that issue resolved. So we're just trying to fight to get to the next day. I can promise you, even as a therapist, having a great support system, family, the whole nine, I've been in some dark places. Too much pressure, feeling overwhelmed, no escape, not knowing what to do. There have been some times where, and I have two sons, a baby boy is getting ready to turn 1 next month. My big guy just turned 7. And there have been some times where I said, you know what? I could just gas the truck up, pack a few things, and just drive, right? Because life is hard, right? And that's something I want to share with you all. Life is hard, right? And so it's not about just avoiding situations or people or things that are going to cause a little bit of emotional distress. It's learning how to have resilience within yourself in your way. What works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for you, all right? So persuading an individual to be able to at least see things a little bit differently. And then the R, referral. A good friend, the same way you go shopping, same way you go traveling, drinking, all the other kind of stuff, go find some resources for your friends, your family members, right? Yes, this is a hard conversation. We understand that. Imagine how difficult it is for someone that's going through this dynamic and they feel like they have no one to turn to, no one to relate with, no one understands what this feels like. If I said, raise your hand if you felt like that, I'm pretty sure everyone's hand in this room would go up, right? Because at a certain point in life, all of us have been there, okay? Let's dig into these resources. We have a room full of folks here right now that are away from their jobs, that are away from school, etc. Let's connect, build on this synergy. There are plenty of resources here. I know people in this room that have dedicated their careers to this space, right? In a city like this, we can be the standard of what healthcare in terms of mental health and resilience and recovery and moving forward looks like to the nation. This is part of the model, right? Question, ask them exactly where they're at, right? Directly. Persuade, get them to see things a little bit differently and actually tell them, hey, listen, I'll support you. If I find some resources, we'll go together. I'll call the person for you. I'll have the consult for you, right? Do what you need to do. And then the R, we say referral, but I'm also changing it a little bit to resources. Even if you don't know anyone that's going through any type of suicidal ideation, it's okay. Develop a resource bank, right? Because you never know when a family member or a friend is gonna be making that phone call to you, all right? QPR.
Yeah, that's good, right? Feel free to write that down. There's some note cards on your table as well if you have any questions. There's some Silence the Shame notepads if you want to take some notes. Write in your agenda, whatever works for you. And again, we will be moving to our Q&A session in just a moment. So those note cards that are on your table, please feel free to write the question. And when we open it up for Q&A, someone from the audience will come grab that from you. And to our live stream viewers as well, utilize the chat function for all of your questions. And someone from the STS team will hand those over to me. Milan, taking care of your mental health is active work. As we talked about earlier during the fireside chat, this is something that is an ongoing journey. Can you talk about what that looks like in your everyday life?
Yes. So I just wanted to note that for my everyday life things that I do now to protect my mental health, it took me a minute to get there. I went to a couple mental hospitals, I read a lot of books, I did a lot of therapy. So the things that work for me now, it took me a minute to get there. But I'd say it depends on my state, how I'm feeling, if I just came home from work, if I'm tired. Like, I need to give myself what I need depending on how I feel. So there's certain things that I need to do that I don't want to be disappointed in myself if I'm not doing like the plan that I had set out for myself yesterday for self-care. If I get home and I'm tired, like I'd say I've been scrapbooking more lately. If I need to take a walk, I'll take a walk. If I need to just lay on the couch and watch TV, sometimes I'll just lay on the couch and watch TV. And I try my best not to feel bad about it because it's active work and sometimes it's hard work. And I try not to make it always so hard on myself. Like sometimes I don't need a whole plan. I just need to do what I need to do. Sometimes I just need to take a nap. And then there's other days where I do need a whole plan. I need to write down, Milan, take your medicine. Milan, make sure that you eat lunch. Make sure that you got enough sleep today, you know? So it really depends on how I'm feeling, but yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And that reminds me too of how people oftentimes say the person who we least show grace to is ourselves. So when it comes time for self-care or our everyday journey, we're oftentimes, very quick to tell somebody else like, oh, take the day off or, take some time to yourself. But then when it comes to you, you don't offer yourself that same grace. So that's a reminder, honestly, for myself, but for those listening to show yourself grace when it comes to your self-care and your wellness. Last question before we jump into the Q&A. Again, please utilize the cards. Dr. Vaughn, what advice can you offer young adults who may be navigating their quarter-life truth in uncertainty?
Take your time. Please take your time. Having it all at once carries a very high tax. right? We talk about inflation right now and the price of things are going up. When you have it all, the car, the house, the kids, the spouse, the job, that comes with a high tax. And you know what that tax is? Your mental health, okay? Be very mindful of the path that you want to be able to chart, right? Have a true understanding of what you're going to get into before you're already in it, right? We are emotionally driven people, which is fine, but we also have to make sure we're taking the time to see things, right? Using discernment and making sure we have a true understanding of the environment that we're walking in, right? No one wants to walk into a dark room, but we do that blindly, right? All the time in this era. Number two, there's a button on your cell phone. It's a red circle with like a line in it. It's called power off. Hit it often.
Yeah.
Hit it often. Someone said when they wake up in the morning, the last thing they want to do is to jump into Instagram's algorithm. We all have done it, right? We all do it all the time. Turn the phone off. Detach, right? Detach. We are living in a hyper, what do they call it? It's a heightened level, right, of engagement and sensitivity. And these platforms have actually mastered, they have psychologists on their team. They've mastered how to connect with the individual mind, right? And in that algorithm, my live feed looks different from yours. And why? Because it has learned how to master all of us, right? You gotta detach from it, and that's how you actually deal with the FOMO and the fear of missing out and, having like negative thoughts about yourself and that comparison, imposter syndrome, perfection. All these things are actually just different words to describe the same thing. Turn the phone off, all right? Take some time for yourself, right? Be okay with who you were uniquely crafted to be, all right? Everyone is not designed to be the same. If we were, it would be very boring to be alive, right? Learn yourself. How do you learn yourself? By putting yourself in different environments. See how you respond. I did not know that I enjoyed kayaking until I found myself down there in South Georgia on Lake Black and down there in Blackshear on whatever lake. Kayaking, I said, wait a minute. I actually like this, right? Is it okay for black men to be out here kayaking on the water, right? You have to learn yourself, and when you do, you become very happy and very proud of who you are been uniquely crafted to be. So take the pressure off yourself. Understand that tax is high. And once you start paying it, it just goes up more and more and more. Take your time. You can't have it all at the same time.
Yes, thank you. Can we give it up for our panelists? Just awesome. Just awesome. So we want to open it up for Q&A. If you do have questions that you wrote, if you could just put those in the air really briefly, and an STS member will come grab those for you. Thank you for the questions. And if you're watching on the live stream, feel free to utilize the chat feature. While I have those questions on the way up, I do want to remind you all that we are selling Silence the Shame merchandise right over here. Bree, if you could raise your hand. Feel free to check out some Silence the Shame merchandise. We have some original pieces, so if you purchase here, ain't nobody in Atlanta gonna have what you got, okay? Because it's original. But we also have our Silence the Shame shirts, our Healing in Public shirts. Our founder and CEO, Eshontee has her book. Or if you're just interested in donating to Silence the Shame and the continued work of advocacy and education around mental health and wellness, feel free to do that there as well. Alrighty, so I would like this question. Oh, Dr. Vaughn. Do you offer virtual therapy sessions, or do you have other males that you know of that offer virtual sessions?
Y'all are gonna give me free time to advertise my company. Holistic Atlanta, www.holisticatlanta.com. We do offer therapy sessions in a virtual space. Actually, right now, due to the pandemic, all of our clients had to switch to virtual therapy, and they never went back to in-person. And so we have really developed a robust clinical team. I gotta give some praise to my team, Sierra, Maria, Ernest. They do a phenomenal job. Dr. D, even my mother, Miss Tina, is on our clinical team doing all of our intakes. So of course we provide virtual therapy services. We are all right now waiting for clients to send in referral forms. We have a button that says register now. We make it very simple. And the information goes right to our intake. We process that and get you on board.
Awesome, thank you so much. This is a question for all of you all. I know we all a little young, but still. What advice would you offer your younger self? And Dr. Vaughn, this was also another question pointed at you, but then there's another one for all of us. So feel free to jump in and share.
Perfect. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned, I guess in my 30s, was you gotta learn how to disappoint people, right? And you have to be okay with it. You know, we cannot be the end-all, be-all solution for everyone. And little riddle, I kind of ask you all this really quickly. There is, let's see, 2 letters become 1 word, and if you put a period behind it, it's a sentence. What is it?
No.
All right. No. If you get very comfortable with saying no to certain things, right, you know, actually, I can't do that right now, you know, because I don't have the time to, or there's just no justification. You put that period behind the no, and it becomes a sentence, and then the other person has to be responsible for finding another option, okay? So some of our preventative care is actually caring about ourselves, right? We spread ourselves so thin for everyone else except for right here. Be okay with saying no.
I would tell my younger self that she's perfectly okay how she is, and to not try to change herself for other people, and for herself too, that she's perfectly fine, she's beautiful, and that even if it's not all figured out, we'll get there. Nothing's all figured out. No one knows everything. So, yeah.
You're not running out of time, Shanti. You're not running out of time. So often we get into a rat race and it's like, I gotta go, gotta get this done. And at a young age, I was really like, let's get to it. And you're not running out of time. You got a whole life to live. So.
Yeah, I guess I would like essentially say exactly the same thing that everybody else just did. I would just tell my younger self that it's okay and to pace myself, you know what I mean, and give myself more grace. Yeah.
I would say we all got something going on. I think a lot of times looking back, I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm such an anxious person. Like, oh my gosh, I have anxiety so bad. Or, well, I talk too much. Yeah, I do, and that's okay. That's who I am. But we all have something, right? And so finding out what your something is and focusing on that. If it's something that you think is a negative, make it a positive quality. If it's something that maybe hinders you, know that other people are dealing with it too. Like, you're not alone. We all have something. What advice or help can we give friends that you can tell are struggling with their mental health? And this could also be for family as well.
Go talk to somebody. Just go talk to somebody. It doesn't matter who it is. Go talk to somebody. I've had friends that go talk to the sky. Just go talk to somebody. It doesn't matter who you talk to. Just talk to somebody. And especially not a person that, it does matter. Not a person that's going to push you over the edge, but someone that you feel comfortable with sharing yourself with. Just go talk to somebody.
I'd say, yes, go talk to somebody. Also, I think sometimes sitting alone with yourself, if you turn off your phone, you sit alone with yourself, maybe go for a walk, you learn so much about yourself and how you're feeling. If you really just take a chance to ask yourself, like, how am I feeling? How long have I been feeling this way? Like, what do I need to do about that? So I definitely think just spending some time alone, also talking to someone, but that can definitely help.
Yeah. This question specifically, Dr. Vaughn, I would like you to address it, but Josh, I know that you have experience in this area too. So it says specifically, we talk about a safe space all of the time. It is mentioned multiple times, but every safe space is truly not safe. What is a true safe space? How can you find one, and how do you work to provide one for others?
Not sure if any space is 100% safe, right? When we say that, essentially what we're saying is, I just need to be able to be vulnerable without judgment. That's what a safe space is, right? Oftentimes when we are speaking with someone, they are listening and then quickly giving us a response, right? Or telling us how we should fix it, as opposed to just listening to receive. A lot of times there are different events that may be curated for, mental health for men or this, that, and the other. Some of those spaces are available. They're few and far between. We try to, create them. But I guess in terms of what that looks like for me, I value my relationships with my friends, right? And even at this stage in life, my friends are now assistant principals and, business owners and been married for 10 years. So it's a little different, right? But you have to have someone that you can connect with and that they just say, you know what, I hear you. And they can reflect what you're saying, right? That safe space essentially is, can I be vulnerable in this conversation without fear of being judged? And if we can build that concept within our relationships with one another, right, then we won't have to create like specific events to where someone can just go to and they just kind of dump everything out, right? Or it makes going to therapy a lot more plausible because we're already in that practice of actually conversing about things that are really close to us emotionally, all right? So I think that's, just kind of keeping it very simple. Can I be vulnerable with you without you judging me and without you giving me a response of how to fix something really quickly?
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I would say discernment. Spirit knows. Spirit knows, going back to the earlier conversation or the part of the conversation where you guys were talking about just like sitting with self, Spirit knows. And if you sit with yourself or go on that walk long enough so that you can get to a space of discerning what's right for me, typically people project the level of energy that Spirit can discern if this is okay or not. And so typically when people are looking for these safe spaces, it's like with that knock on the door, that's like, I fear judgment, like you was just saying, so can I discern the intention in this room or in this space? And I think as long as the people that set up this event or this setting has the proper intention, I think that's where the safety net is created. It's in the intention. And so as long as it's not some corporation or event that's like, they're getting paid for this, things that may serve any other purpose outside of what I pulled up for, I think so. I guess to answer that question, discernment and making sure that your intention and their intention is right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you guys so much. All right, we have about 2 more questions, and then we'll be wrapping up with our final words. What advice would you all give for navigating life challenges that might impact your wellness? So losing a family member, going through a crisis, what are some advice or tips that you can offer there?
I would just say, we all can't be our own therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists. When you're going through true trauma and you recognize this is something that you just can't process by yourself, it is completely appropriate for you to develop a really good therapeutic relationship with someone. Does that mean start going to therapy tomorrow? No, right? You may just need a consult, just kind of get things started and kind of understand where this may fit for you. You may benefit more from a life coach, or just getting some wellness education or being directed towards the resource that benefits you the most. But just know that doing it by yourself, you may actually cause more damage and more harm to you long term than actually being a little bit vulnerable and allowing someone to be able to assist you that has your best interest at heart.
I would say finding an outlet is really important. No matter what that is, it can be religious, spiritual, it can be a hobby that you like, whatever that is, finding an outlet is extremely important for me.
I second the finding an outlet. A lot of times when we go through trauma, one thing that I've seen very common amongst foster youth is that we find a creative space to go into, and it really helps. So finding that outlet is really important.
Yep, same thing. And that is okay, feel it. Every human deals with it, you know what I'm saying? And so I think we all leave our crib. When we leave the house, we put face on. And so I meet people and we'll never see the same people over and over again. You say, hey, how you doing? Everybody gives us this generic, I'm okay. And I ask people, I go a step further and say are you though? How are you really doing today? And so like you were saying earlier, I kind of not force people, but I create spaces where we get to experience humanity. I think, it's just my opinion, that we were created to help each other, each one teach one, right? Through these experiences. The older people, that you're supposed to come back and help us navigate through these things because you already did it. So I think by showing up authentically, bro, everybody goes through the same thing. So just feel it and it's okay. You know what I mean? Yeah,
that's good. This is kind of my last words, but something that's always helped me is navigating crisis is remembering you've experienced pain before and you're gonna experience it again. A lot of times I remember when I was younger, I would have my heart broken and be like, I've never felt this way before. But in all actuality, I might have felt that way before and I got over to the other side, or I've experienced grief and I'm in that moment, you feel like you've never felt anything like it. But every time you always get to the other side. So even in the midst of it, it might not look like you're gonna see the other way. You've done it before and you can do it again. So that's what's helped me. We have a couple other questions, but we are gonna wrap up. If you are interested in speaking to panelists specifically, or you have some questions, they're gonna share their social media pages and things of that nature so that you can connect with them, and same for resources. If you look in our
pamphlet or booklet, on the back page, there are some really awesome resources. And so specifically related to suicide prevention and mental health awareness. But also if you scan that QR code, you can go to the Silence the Shame website for other resources as well. So as we wrap up, I want to offer you all just a quick 15-30 seconds to share your final words regarding what you hope people take away from this conversation and what you want people to know about mental health and suicide awareness.
More of this, right? Because what happens is we do a lot of things that are focused on youth, not with Silence and Shame, but in our society. A lot of things focused on youth. We always get the us old heads, right? I can officially say I'm an old head now. We do a lot of talking and pontificate, but what we don't do, we don't give the voice, right, to that 18 to 30-year-old group, right? That's why social media has been the place to where they allow themselves to be heard. This right here is substance. Me at my life stage, right? I need to hear this because it actually gives me a reminder of where I was, and I can also help them to understand where you're gonna go, right? Working with young folks has become my new ministry, and when I say young folks, I mean that young professional age, 21, 25, 30, really understand that transition in life. So more of this right here is really important. My contact on social media, as I stated, Holistic Atlanta, you'll find our practice on there. My personal Instagram page, kind of like my landing page for everything, at the THEATLLPC, just the Atlanta Licensed Professional Counselor. Everything, you'll find everything from our link tree right there. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak with you all today.
I'd say remember how beautiful it is to just be here. And remember that in the present, we're in the present, and that's all we need to be. And do your best to validate the people around you and to hear them out and to give them grace. And I'd say scan the QR code for Silence the Shame.
You want to share your social media? Oh, okay. Well, I just want to make sure. And one thing I would say is that we all have to bloom where we are planted, and that we all matter, no matter what's going on in our life. We all matter. And you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook at, it's spelled Eshontee. My name is pronounced Eshontee, but Eshontee Rowe. And you can find me on Instagram at Rowe Muse Inc. It's ROWEMUSINC, Rowe Muse Inc., and that's where you'll see a little bit of my music stuff and stuff from college and all that stuff too.
I would say, I hope, especially everyone here, especially the viewers at home though, I hope you guys got permission from today, if you didn't have it already. Permission to go out and speak to somebody, permission to feel, permission to scan the QR code if you're in the room, just permission, and that is okay. And again, I'm Josh Waters on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. You can find me at Josh Waters Music, and I'm more than just an artist, okay? So I'm not a person who, like I say, shows up with the answers, but I'm extremely interested in having a conversation, man. And I love you in real life, man, so yeah.
What? Can we give it up for everybody on the stage? Thank you all so much.